Hello, I'm Giovanna Begotti from the University of São Paulo in Brazil, and my research is titled Behind the Belle of Amherst myth, an analysis of Emily Dickinson's representation in paratexts of translated books. And in advance, I want to thank the organizers of this conference for accepting my proposal. So, who was Emily Dickinson? She was a North American poet who lived in the early 19th century in a small town in Massachusetts called Amherst. Dickinson achieved great posthumous success, becoming a symbol of lyrical and metaphysical poetry. She wrote about 1,800 poems, but only 10 of them were published during her lifetime, sent by family and friends. The first collection of Dickinson's poems was published in 1890. However, the poems were not exactly Dickinson's poems, as the editors Mabel Umistad and Thomas Higginson manipulated Dickinson's poems because they judged the poet's style to be very different from what was considered normal for 19th century poetic standards and chose to fix it. And Dickinson's poems also broke with what was imposed on women's writing at the time, so they tried to fit her into a context of the code of the true womanhood, and much less someone who subverted all these traditional values of the patriarchal society in which the poet lived, presenting strategies that counter gender construction and create her own way of viewing and writing poetry. However, not only Dickinson's poems were subject to manipulations, but also her life. When Dickinson was around 30, she began her period of reclusion, rarely leaving her house, and because of this, the townspeople started spreading rumors about her, saying she was more like a myth. However, this myth only grew larger after the first posthumous publication. Loomis Todd contacted influential people of the time to promote the book, and as a sales strategy, the editor, along with Higginson, shaped the poet's image to fit the popular cliches of the late 19th century, portraying her as a sad, reclusive woman who dressed in white. And as predicted by the editors, the first collection became a bestseller. From these rumors, many researchers took the initiative to try to uncover the mystery surrounding Dickinson, which led them to realize there was an intimate relationship between Dickinson's life and poetry. These mysteries were never solved, but they divided opinions and allowed other mysteries to arise, such as the Dickinson's love life, the mystery. And thinking about the representation of Dickinson like a myth, and considering that Dickinson's poetics subvert all these traditional values, one of the main objectives of this research is to situate Dickinson's work and life within contemporary discussions, such as in gender studies. Thus, considering that the poetry and perception of who Emily Dickinson was became distorted with the first posthumous publications, this research aims to present an analysis of how Emily Dickinson's image was represented on paratexts of translated poetry collections published in Brazilian Portuguese. The chosen editions were those by Aila de Oliveira Gomes, José Lira, Isamara Landa, Adalberto Miller, and Christine Miller, under the hypothesis that just like the studies about Dickinson's life, the paratexts also shaped the image of the poet to achieve different purpose. And about the selected editions, Aila de Oliveira Gomes, her first experience with poetry translation was with Dickinson's poems, which earned her the Best Literary Translation Award in 1985. José Lira's tributes to Emily Dickinson's poetry are his translations and his numerous papers published. Isamara Landa edition is among the few collections of Dickinson's poems translated by a woman. Adalberto Miller is the first Brazilian translator to publish translations of all of Dickinson's poems. Christine Miller, the editor, has become one of the most renowned researchers of Emily Dickinson's life and poetry. The theories I chose are about translation, feminist practice and gender studies, paratexts, and the representation of women as a myth. So the first one, feminist studies, were only linked to translation studies after the cultural turn, when translation was no longer seen as a simple transfer of meaning between the languages, but as a way to reflect on political and cultural contexts. And this started with the Canadian feminists. However, as the studies progressed, there was a need for feminists to go beyond the understanding that the term woman as a solid base, therefore the term feminist is replaced by gender. But the term gender itself carries its own problems, as Judith Butler points out, regarding gender being performatively produced and imposed. These ideas had a significant package and branch out into other concepts and research, such as translating classical women authors forgotten by the literary canon, and also the paratext became part of these new studies. Paratext is a term coined by Gerard Genet in 1981. It encompasses everything that is in a book, such as introduction, book covers, postface, preface, and the function of this paratext can also be to influence the reading. And because of this, paratexts have become valuable allies for translators, enabling them to step out of invisibility, as described by Lawrence Venuti, and present a translation process to demonstrate that what the reader holds is not the original one but the translated book. Thus, from the visibility the paratexts bring to the work of translation, Catherine Batchelor points to research possibilities by considering social, cultural, and ideological perspectives, as in the studies that connected paratexts with gender issues. According to Batchelor, paratexts in dialogue with gender and translation studies can also reveal how paratexts have often been used to assert dominant misogynist views and to contain women's writing within boundaries considered acceptable. And not only were the works of these women authors subject to manipulation and censorship, but also their lives were often portrayed through myths, or as Simone de Beauvoir terms it, through the myth of woman, where women are seen merely as the author, while men are depicted through the hero's journey. Women are portrayed in secondary or dependent roles, or are cast as the villain of the story, as in the case of Pandora, who was responsible for unleashing chaos, unlike the great virile figures Hercules, Prometheus, and Persephone. Upon recognizing these oppressive narratives, materialist feminists advocate for a fight to dismantle this myth of woman. Following these ideas, one way that translation studies found to contribute with this, according to Pilar Godayon, was through the rewriting and reinterpretation of metaphors related to feminine myths or stereotypes. Thus, through this reinterpretation, Pandora is no longer represented as the source of chaos. Instead, by opening the box, she is responsible for spreading countless possibilities of meanings within discourses. So, considering everything we discussed earlier, I have brought two examples of my analysis. It is a fact that Dickinson became reclusive, right? However, the reasons for these are mysterious, and since there isn't much information available, each paratexts offer different perspectives. According to Gomez, the reason for Dickinson's reclusiveness was Reverend Charles Wordsworth, who, according to the translator, was the poet's greatest love. However, for her, this love was not reciprocated, as he was married. And when the Reverend moved to California, Dickinson fell into depression and consequently withdrew from society. In the case of Lyra, reclusiveness is a result of a newness, nephritis, based on some of her symptoms of the disease. The translators suggest that the poet was ashamed to appear before others. However, for Lyra, the consequence of this illness was her solitude. In Landa's paratexts, the reason is attributed to romantic relationships and the successive loss of loved ones. However, the consequence is not solitude, as in the previous paratexts. According to Lando, despite not leaving her house, the poet maintained many friendships. As domestic chores were labors, her recluseness allowed Dickinson to dedicate more time to her poetry. The same perspective is shared by Kristen Miller and Adalberto Miller. They suggested that her reclusiveness had a positive impact by providing more time to focus on her poetry, as domestic work consumed most of her time. However, neither Kristen nor Adalberto Miller attribute specific reasons for her reclusiveness. And when analyzing the data obtained, it becomes evident how language is subject to organizing ideas of social reality at the unconscious level. As Showalter points out, both Gomez and Lyra refer to Dickinson using the term poet to fit her into a context of poetry that only men could occupy. For example, Gomez uses the word poet to refer to Dickinson, always to indicate the masculine way, the poet or poeta in Portuguese. Lyra justifies the use of the word poet because he did not want the word poetess to become a formal comparison with the Salon poetess, the 19th century women poets who wrote sentimental poems. It is not by chance that in these two editions, the myth representation prevails. In Gomez's case, the myth is that of the bride and novice, referring to the white dress that Dickinson wore. And in the Lyra's case, Dickinson is portrayed as a lonely spinster. It only in the editions by Lando, Adalberto Miller, and Kristen Miller, that Dickinson begins to be represented as a poet, someone who writes poetry and is recognized for it. These Dickinson also seemed less a reclusive and more someone ahead of her time, a revolutionary figure in Lando's case and a feminist and queer figure in the paratexts by Kristen and Adalberto Miller. So moving toward to conclusion, it was possible to observe that the paratexts present numerous changes regarding Dickinson's biography, as well as the other themes that there wasn't enough time to mention. Example, at times the poet was portrayed as religious, at other times as rebellious, and other times a Puritan mystic. The mythical figure prevails in the edition by Giovanna Gomez and Joseph Lyra. Dickinson's image was reinterpreted in the editions by Lando, Kristen Miller, and Adalberto Miller. There is little consensus among the editions, demonstrating the theological aspects of a translator and editor guided and shaped Dickinson's image for the reader of these editions. And there are some of my references. So thank you so much.